Hello everyone, welcome again to our academy. We are continuing our course How to Think Logically, and we will talk about forms of evidence. Thinking is divided into understanding and judgment. Understanding needs definition, judgment needs evidence. Both definition and evidence is formed of matter and form. The matter of definition includes essentials and accidentals. The form of a definition is to start by the general concepts and moves towards the special ones. A limiting definition uses essentials. A descriptive one uses accidentals. We will talk about the form of evidence. Let's look at these three examples of the three forms of evidence. The first one, Jack is British. This is a proposition. Every British is European. This is another proposition. When propositions are used as parts of an evidence, they are called premises. So, if Jack is British and every British is European, the conclusion will be Jack is European. This is the conclusion. If Jack is really British and you are certain about this, and every British is really a European, and you are certain about this, the conclusion will be true and certain. The second example, Jack is British and tall. Mike is British and tall. So, every British is tall. This conclusion is uncertain. The third example, Jack is British and white. Jamal is British. So, Jamal is white. This conclusion is also uncertain. These are the three forms of evidence. Let's analyze them. In the first example, Jack is British. This is a special proposition. Every British is European. This is a general or a universal proposition. Jack is European. This is a special one. So, in the first form, we move from general to special. In the second example, Jack is British and tall. This is a special one. Mike is British and tall. This is a special one. Every British is tall. This is a general or a universal one. So in the second form, we move from special to general. In the third form, Jack is British and white. This is a special proposition. Jamal is British, a special one. Jamal is white, also a special one. So in the third form, we move from special to special. So, these are the three forms of evidence. In the first form, we move from general to special. This form is called syllogism. In the second form, we move from special to general. This form is called induction. In the third form, we move from special to special. This form is called analogy. Syllogism is the only form that always produces a true and a certain conclusion, provided that the premises are true and certain. And this is a very important condition. Let's look at a graphic presentation of these forms. In syllogism, this large circle is the British. This is Jack. Jack is British. If there is a description or a concept that can apply on all the British, it must apply on Jack. This is very obvious. In induction, this large circle is the British. This is Jack. If Jack is tall, this doesn't make all the British tall. And this is very obvious too. In analogy, this large circle is the British. This is Jack and this is Jamal. If Jack is white, this doesn't make Jamal white. This is also very obvious. So, syllogism is the only form of evidence that produces true and certain conclusion. We can also represent syllogism as follows. A is B. Every B is C. So A is C. This is true and certain, provided that the premises are true and certain. So syllogism is the most important form of evidence, and it leads to a true and certain conclusion, provided that the premises are true and certain. Also, in syllogism, there is always a concept that is repeated in the two premises and it is not present in the conclusion. Another examples. Iron is a metal. Every metal is conductive, so iron is conductive. Every metal is conductive is a general or a universal premise. Iron is conductive is a special conclusion, so this is a syllogism. The conclusion here is true and certain, provided that the premises are true and certain. In induction, lead is a metal and conductive. Copper is a metal and conductive. So every metal is conductive. This conclusion is uncertain. This doesn't mean that it's wrong. It only means that in this form of evidence, we are uncertain about the conclusion. In analogy, lead is a metal and conductive. Iron is a metal, so iron is also conductive. This conclusion is also uncertain. Someone may say that the general or the universal premise in the syllogism comes always from an induction. This is not true. Not every universal or general premise or proposition comes from an induction. For example, when we say that every justice is to give everyone his or her or its rights, this proposition comes from pure mental thinking, from the understanding of the meaning of justice, not from an induction, and so on. So syllogism is not always based on an induction. On the other hand, induction and analogy are based on syllogism. If you look at this example, if lead is a metal and conductive, copper is a metal and conductive, these premises alone can't produce the conclusion. You must also believe that every metal is like lead and copper, or every metal is lead and copper. If you have this general or universal premise or proposition, you can produce the conclusion. You can reach the conclusion. So in fact, induction is some sort of a syllogism. The same applies on analogy. Lead is a metal and conductive. Iron is also a metal. This doesn't make iron conductive. You must have a premise or a proposition in your mind, a general or a universal one, that says that every property of iron is the same as lead. From this premise or proposition, you can reach the conclusion. So, syllogism is not always based on induction. In fact, induction and analogy are based on syllogism, and this is very important. Syllogism is the main form of evidence. Another examples. The universe is organized. Every organized thing has an organizer. So the universe has an organizer, or must have an organizer. The conclusion is true and certain, provided that the premises are true and certain. Another example. Theft is injustice. Every injustice is bad, so theft is bad. The universal or the general premise, every injustice is bad, comes from the understanding of injustice, not from an induction. Another example of induction. Cell is organized, atom is organized, so everything is organized. The conclusion is uncertain. An example of analogy. Cell is organized and formed of proteins. An atom is also organized, so an atom is also formed of proteins. The conclusion is uncertain. So, we have learned the forms of evidence. Syllogism, in which we move from general to special. Induction, in which we move from special to general. Analogy, in which we move from special to special. We will have more examples and more applications on the forms of evidence in the next episode. Follow us, and thank you.